All right, hello everyone. I hope you are doing well. Today we are going to continue to look at Japan, and we are going to look at a few key questions that we're going to try and answer with Japan. So, number one is, how did Japan unify? So, we're going to see in a little bit that Japan begins the story with where we pick it up as very fragmented and broken up. So, how does it come together into one unified group? The second piece that we're going to look at is, why does Japan eventually isolate itself from industrialization and global trade? So, we just spent time looking at Europe expanding and connecting continents and the world becoming more of a global network. And we're going to see Japan isolate itself from that. Later in the week, we're going to see China isolate itself from that. Both of these groups backing off and not wanting to take a part in the global marketplace. So we're going to look at, why would that be? Why would anyone not want to participate? So I need to take you back before I can take you forward. So where we pick up in Japan um, is the mid 1400s. And at that time, local lords ruled, and a civil war is going to come across the country. And this warring period is known as Sengoku. Sengoku. So that's from 1467 to 1568, right at 100 years. We have a tumultuous time where all of these leaders are trying to get more and more power. These leaders are known as the daimyo. The daimyo. And they are leaders in their own little areas. Think of them almost as mayors having a lot of the power. There is still an emperor, but the emperor in this case is the figurehead. And when we say figurehead, we mean somebody who, at first glance, may look like they have a lot of power, but doesn't actually do anything, doesn't actually make any policy or enact any policy. The common modern example of a figurehead is the Queen of England. The Queen of England is technically the most powerful person in England. However, it's really the prime minister who makes a lot of the decisions in political changes. The emperor is like that Queen of England, technically in charge, but doesn't really do much. The daimyo, in order to maintain their power and maintain control over their land, they build armies of mounted samurai and gun bearing infantry. Now, we think of samurai as having um, just bladed weaponry on horseback, but there are guns in this era, and we will see where those guns come from towards the end of our discussion here. So the daimyo are the local lords who are the ones that are really in control of the power, and they all have their little areas that they're in control of. And the daimyo use the samurai to build up their own mini armies to keep control of their power. But leaders are going to realize that, nothing good can get done if everything is all fragmented. This is not an efficient system to have different leaders everywhere, and Sengoku, where people are constantly fighting over land and killing one another for more power. So leaders start the process of unifying the country and restoring order. So this is going to be in a couple different steps. Step one is Oda Nobunaga. So he is a daimyo who actually seizes the capital of Kyoto in 1568. So he expands his individual land to include Kyoto. And he starts killing rival daimyo and Buddhist monks and monasteries in an effort to gain more power and keep his power. Unfortunately, he went too far when he started attacking religious folks. People are okay with you taking out your rival daimyo for power and trying to take over more land, but once you start messing around with religion, that's when people start getting upset with you. And he had to commit ritual suicide. And he had to commit what is known as seppuku or seppuku. It's both ways, but this is where I want you to pause this video and jump to the video that is posted on Google Classroom labeled seppuku. This is a weird ritual. Basically, what it is going to happen is anytime you are dishonored in any way, and in this case, if your allies turn against you, that is dishonorable. What you are asked to do is commit suicide. So the way this works is the person who needs to commit suicide would come in, they would kneel down, and there would be a drink. They would take the drink of sake, which is a Japanese liquid or a Japanese alcohol beverage, and they would drink it in exactly 2 sips. If you take it in 1, you are seen as being greedy. If you take it in 3, you are seen as delaying or trying to draw out what is about to happen. 2 means the perfect amount. Then you would pick up the dagger, and I'm going to stand up a little bit so you can see it. You would plunge it into your stomach. Then you would go up. This is cutting down, left, and right. And if you were able to make it through that entire cross, you were seen as exceptionally honorable. Most people would not make it through that entire cross because you can imagine plunging a blade into where a lot of your organs are is quite painful, and the human body can only maintain so much pain. There would be a person behind you who's named the second. Their job, they're standing behind you with a blade, is to, once you start showing pain, to not let you suffer. They're to come and strike you on the back of the head to deliver the second blow, the final blow to kill you. So it's a way to kind of put you out of your misery. But it is dishonorable to behead someone who is committing seppuku. So if you are the second and you come down with your blade on the back of their neck too hard and you chop off their head, guess what? It's your turn for seppuku. So the second is not a job that you would want. So if you haven't, check out that video. It's a little weird, but it's a good characterization of what happens. So Oda Nobunaga starts the process. He's dead. Toyotomi Hideyoshi picks up where he left off. He was the general under Nobunaga, so he was basically Nobunaga's right-hand man. And he picks up where Nobunaga leaves off, conquering more territory and growing their land, growing their power. He launched an invasion of Korea. He actually tries to extend Japan out into Korea, but the war effort will eventually end when Hideyoshi dies. So Nobunaga is step number 1. Toyotomi Hideyoshi is step number 2. He's continuing the process, continuing to expand. And number 3 is Tokugawa Ieyasu. Tokugawa Ieyasu is the one who is going to complete the unification of Japan. He will be the one to unify Japan. So in 1603, Ieyasu becomes the shogun or sole ruler. Remember when I talked earlier about the Queen of England and her being a figurehead and the prime minister really being the one who controlled all of the power? The shogun is that prime minister role. Um, in this case, even more powerful than the prime minister because the prime minister has to answer to parliament and the shogun answers to nobody but himself. The capital would be established at Edo in present day Tokyo. Um, and Tokugawa Ieyasu used restrictions to keep the daimyo under control. One of his big restrictions that really helped keep the daimyo under his thumb, the rival daimyo, because if you just took power by taking over more land, you can be pretty confident that people who have the same goals and aspirations as you might be coming after you as well. So you need to do something to keep them under control. And one of the steps that he takes is a phrase you might have heard of: keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. It's difficult for enemies, in this case, rival daimyo, to plot against you, to take up arms against you, to somehow overthrow you if they are constantly under your thumb. You're constantly around them. You're not really giving them much room to breathe or plan. So he requires that every other year, daimyo have to take a 1 month sort of vacation slash pilgrimage to Edo, so he can keep them and keep an eye on them. What that does is it takes them sometimes a month to get there. They're there for a month, sometimes a month to get back. He's able to keep an eye on them. He knows that they're not causing problems for the 3 months that he's there, somehow in his control. So it's really a keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of life. The Tokugawa shogunate, which a shogunate, you can see shogun in the word shogunate. Shogunate is kind of like the word dynasty in China. It's a long period of rulers from the same lineage, same family. Hopefully, when you see those dates, 1603 to 1867, you don't think that it's the same guy that is ruling. I don't think it's quite possible to live to be 164 years old, let alone 264 years old. I'm not sure what the oldest person in the world is, but I'm going to guess in the hundred and teens, maybe one like 15 or something. So not even close to that. But it's the same lineage, same dynasty that is ruling. So there is this hierarchy in Japan, and we looked at the hierarchy in the quote unquote new world. Remember when we looked at the different levels of Spaniards, we had mestizos, we had all of these different groups in the new world. There is this in Japan as well. So technically, the emperor is on top. Technically, he's the most powerful. But as we mentioned, he's really a figurehead, not really doing much ruling. He's there just to sit back, look pretty, and eat cupcakes. I don't know. I assume he eats cupcakes because all the pictures that you see of Japanese emperors, they're in the big gowns and sitting up, and they're rather portly. There's a lot of emperor to love. So they're at the top, but they're not really powerful. They're a figurehead. Underneath is the shogun. That's that prime minister role. That's the true leader. Then you have underneath that, the local leaders, those daimyo. Then underneath that, you have the samurai, the warriors for the daimyo. And then at the bottom, as always, the peasants. The peasants supporting the top. That's how it always goes. We're going to see that time and time again throughout our other units, that the peasants are always at the bottom supporting the top. So you may be thinking to yourself, what was society like in Tokugawa, Japan? Well, boy, do I have the slide for you. It actually was pretty good for the most part in certain cases. It had a long period of peace, prosperity, isolation. We'll talk about that in a minute, and cultural growth. A lot of these things can happen when you don't have local leaders killing each other for more land. When you don't have people constantly trying to overthrow each other, when there's really one leadership structure, it's a lot easier for peace to take place, prosperity meaning um, growth in life. People are having a good life, so things go well. That being said, it is a rigidly structured society. That society that we saw before, that hierarchy, you couldn't really move from one level to another. You were kind of locked in by your birthright into your role, with that shogun acting as the ruler. We're going to skip this Confucianism for now, um, but as a theme, looking at the next point, as the theme that we are going to see again and again throughout this class, leaders continuously think it's a good idea to tax the peasants. And they think, okay, well, the peasants are the one who should be providing for us. They're the working class, but the peasants are the ones who make the least amount of money. So first of all, by taxing them highly, you're not going to get a lot out of them because they don't make a lot of money. But additionally, you are taking away the little money that they do have, which really makes it difficult for that lower class to prosper. So these peasants start leaving farms for cities in search of better lives and better working conditions. So by the mid 1700s, Japan is starting to become a more urban society. Urban means city life. So people are starting to move away from those farms into the cities, looking for better jobs, better living conditions, a better livelihood for them, where they can make some more money and potentially keep some more of that money. Stop me if you're shocked. Women don't have a whole ton of rights in this. I'm sorry, women in the class. You're going to have to wait until the very end of World History B, and then you'll start getting some rights. And then it's the same thing about halfway through US History A, you'll start getting some rights. But unfortunately, women are kind of being put down by the men, and they are kind of not really given um, any opportunities to work outside of the home in any meaningful way. Another social invention that we get from this time period is the haiku. May remember that from English, haikus. Present some images in a 5-7-5 meter. 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. So this was created in Japan. So for example, an old silent pond. A frog jumps into the pond. Splash. Silence again. So it gives me this image in a 5-7-5 meter. So now I want you to come up with one on your own that describes your feelings towards school. Let's see if we can get some positive ones. In the past, when I've done this, it's almost all negative. Let's see if we can get some positive ones. But remember, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. See what you got. All right. Now that you've shared your lovely haikus, we want to focus in on that isolation piece. So here's an image, by the way, that shows how fragmented everything was. And we looked at just the Japanese by themselves, but now the Europeans are going to come knocking at the door. And initially, when they first get here, the Europeans were welcomed. In 1543, the Portuguese reach Japan. They're coming too. And they're bringing a lot of new goods, a lot of new products to Europe. Things like tobacco, firearms. So that's when I was talking about these the daimyo little mini armies having weapons. It's a result of the Portuguese. And it completely changes the way that Japan can fight. There's a difference between being able to do blade fighting and only being able to fight from an arm plus a sword away. When you have firearms, you can shoot somebody from a distance. So it completely changes the way Japan fights. Additionally, many forts start being constructed and redone to combat cannons because cannons are being brought. So they are having to remake a lot of these forts, remake a lot of these military buildings to combat the cannons. In 1549, Christian missionaries arrive. And if we're thinking back to the last unit, we can probably think to ourselves, this isn't going to go well. But at the beginning, the Europeans, or the Japanese, associated the Christian missionaries with their trading partners. So they were accepted. They thought, you know what? We've had great experience with the traders from Europe up to this point. Why should the missionaries be any different? Come on in. You're welcome. Your people have been good to us so far. We are happy to have you here. But the missionaries start going around trying to convert people. And it's never good when you're trying to convert people in a country that is already struggling to maintain power. And Ieyasu becomes upset. He sees that these missionaries are starting to change the system that he has set up, and it's already fragile, so any changes worry him. So he bans Christianity entirely in 1612. I don't want to hear about it. He's basically the Grinch. I don't want to hear about Christmas, no presents, no reindeer, no Rudolph, none of it. Christianity, we're done. In 1637, so about 25 years later, there's a small rebellion that is put down. And Ieyasu is thinking to himself, you know what? Bet you it's those dang missionaries that are responsible for this. You know, they didn't have any problems before they came. Now they're coming around and I'm having these rebellions that I'm having to deal with. So, you know what, Christians, you guys are responsible for this. You guys are going to answer for these crimes. So European missionaries, they were either exiled, which means kicked out of the country, or straight up killed. So a rebellion that in all likelihood was not 100% the result of Christianity. Christianity was used as the scapegoat for it or blamed for it. And that leaves a very bad taste in the Japanese leadership's mouth with regards to the Europeans. And Ieyasu makes sure he maintains that everyone is following Buddhism, the religion that they had in place up to this time. So this persecution of Christians is the beginning of controlling foreign ideas, where the government, the people in charge, want to make sure that they are controlling what ideas are coming into the country. What impact are these foreign countries having on Japan? So in 1639, they institute a closed country policy. What that means is we're going to have one port open to trade, Nagasaki. And for you history buffs, that name, Nagasaki, might be a familiar name to you. Think World War II, think atom bomb. But only the Dutch and Chinese are allowed there. So we're only having one port. Only the Dutch and Chinese are allowed. The shogunate is going to run all the control or run all the trade through them. Everything else, we're closed. We want no other outside influence, no foreigners coming in. We saw a lot of closed country policies taking place during COVID. People didn't want other nations coming in, people from other nations coming in and bringing COVID with them. Currently, even as of October, we are still banned as Americans, banned from flying or traveling to a number of places because they worry that it could spark a COVID outbreak in their countries. This is obviously for a different reason. This is because they are worried about foreign ideas messing up their system, messing up their power structure, and potentially ruining their society. Um, Not only is no one let in, no one's let out. If you are Japanese and you leave, you are no longer welcome back in the country. That is because you could have gone out, been indoctrinated by these foreign countries, and picked up some of the same bad beliefs or bad habits that are out there and then brought them back into Japan, which would be equally problematic. So if you leave, you are not allowed to return. So I want to jump back here to the first slide and look at these questions. So number one, how did Japan unify? Go ahead and answer that in the question box. And number two, why did Japan eventually isolate itself from industrialization and global trade? Go ahead and answer that. So I hope you learned a little bit here. I hope we are in a place where we're starting to understand why things in Europe were very different than things in Japan. We are going to see that things in China are similar but different. We're going to have a similar result, but different reasonings for it, where we are going to still end in isolationism, but the why is going to be very different. So that completes this lesson for today, and I'll see you soon.